They say a man's worth is measured by what he builds. But I learned the truth much later. A man's worth is revealed by what he rebuilds after he's destroyed. My destruction began on an ordinary Tuesday. The kind of day that looks harmless from the outside. Blue sky, coffee on the desk, polite smiles that hide silent wars. But that was the day my life folded in on itself. I remember the sound of his voice, sharp, cold, confident. He called me into his office with that condescending smirk, the kind you see on people who mistake power for intelligence. He told me I wasn't company material, that I lacked initiative, that I was, in his words, useless. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there, watching his mouth move, like a puppet rehearsing the same speech he'd given to others before me. But inside, something ancient and quiet began to wake, something that didn't scream or beg. It observed. When I walked out of that building, it wasn't just unemployment I carried with me. It was humiliation, wrapped in silence, sealed with a promise I hadn't yet spoken, that one day I would return. Not as a worker, not as a subordinate, but as the man who owned everything he built his pride upon. Revenge doesn't begin with hatred. It begins with stillness, the kind that seeps into your bones, whispering that you're not done yet, that the story isn't over. For weeks, I disappeared from everyone's sight. No calls, no texts, no explanations. People thought I'd broken, and maybe for a while I did, because losing everything forces you to see the world for what it truly is, a marketplace where loyalty is currency and betrayal is just bad math. But pain, if you listen closely, teaches patterns, and I started studying those patterns like a language. Every mistake I made at that company, every insult, every rejection, became data. I was mapping my enemy without even knowing it. They say rock bottom builds character. That's not true. Rock bottom builds clarity, and clarity is the most dangerous weapon a man can hold. Before that day, I was ordinary. The kind of man who believed that hard work and loyalty could outshine politics and power. I worked late, volunteered for projects no one wanted, defended the same boss who would later destroy me. I thought success was a straight line, dedication in, results out. I was wrong. Success isn't about what you deliver. It's about who gets the credit when you do. Back then, I was naive enough to believe in mentorship. He'd taken me under his wing, or so I thought. He used to tell me, "Stick close to me, and you'll go far." I didn't realize he meant only as far as he allowed me to go. He was the kind of man who built his empire on borrowed brilliance. He took ideas from interns, efforts from juniors, and turned them into his own legend. And I, blinded by admiration, handed him mine freely. I remember the night I built the system that saved his division from collapse. Weeks of sleepless nights, thousands of lines of code, all for the company's future. The next morning, he presented it to the board as his own innovation. The applause wasn't mine. The promotion wasn't mine. The credit, the power, the praise, all his. Still, I stayed, because belief is a stubborn thing. You tell yourself that one day he'll see your worth, that one day your loyalty will mean something. But loyalty, I learned, is just another word for leverage, and he used mine until there was nothing left to use. There's a moment before betrayal when everything still looks fine, when you're laughing, unaware that the knife is already being drawn. I remember his handshake after that last meeting. He looked me in the eyes and said, "You've done good work." Hours later, I was escorted out by security with a severance envelope and a silence so heavy it could crush the air. That's when I realized he never saw me as useless. He saw me as dangerous, because I knew too much, and worse, I had started believing in myself. That night, I sat in my empty apartment, staring at the same city I had worked so hard to belong to. The lights looked different now, colder, distant. Every building felt like a lie. But somewhere beneath the despair, Something was forming. Not rage, not sorrow. Resolve. That's when I wrote the first line of my new life. One day he'll wish he fired me sooner. Revenge doesn't start the moment you're wronged. It starts when you realize why you were wronged. It took me months to see the truth behind my firing. It wasn't performance. It wasn't budget cuts. It was fear. My boss, Adrian Cole, wasn't protecting the company. He was protecting his illusion of power. He couldn't stand the thought that someone beneath him might outgrow him. He built his authority like a house of mirrors, all reflections, no foundation. And I had become the one reflection that no longer obeyed the light. For a long time, I told myself it didn't matter. That I'd move on, find another job, rebuild. But betrayal doesn't fade like heartbreak. It lingers, it teaches, it evolves. And mine evolved into obsession. Every morning, I'd wake before dawn, not to work for a paycheck, but to study him, not as a boss, as a specimen. I watched every interview he gave, read every article that mentioned his name, analyzed his speeches, his habits, his alliances. He was predictable. Arrogant men always are. He surrounded himself with people who feared him more than they respected him. He built systems that revolved around him, not around sustainability, and that was his weakness. When the man at the center falls, the whole structure collapses. I began drawing the map of his downfall, not on paper, but in my mind, detail by detail. Every company he partnered with, every client he betrayed, every skeleton he buried beneath his success. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. But the world doesn't hand you justice for free. It makes you earn it, quietly, strategically. So, I started small, freelance contracts, consulting gigs, using the same skills he once dismissed as useless. And every client I helped, every project I completed, led me one step closer to his world again. Closer, but unseen. Within a year, I was working with his competitors. Within 2, I was advising the same investors who once financed him. They didn't remember me, but I remembered every one of them. I kept my name out of headlines, my face out of meetings. Because revenge works best when you're invisible. While Adrian was busy polishing his reputation, I was building something quieter, smarter, a network, a company without a name at first, just a whisper in the industry. We specialized in efficiency. The same systems I once built for him, only better, cleaner, faster. And as his empire began to slow, plagued by delays, lawsuits, and poor decisions, mine began to rise. Silent, steady, inevitable. I heard rumors about him through mutual contacts. He was aging badly, not in body, but in spirit. The man who once mocked me for my silence now found himself surrounded by silence. His employees avoided him. His investors questioned him. His wife left him. The cracks were forming, and all I had to do was wait. Because patience is the purest form of revenge. One night, I was invited to a private gala, a charity event for industry leaders. It wasn't my world yet, but I attended anyway. And there he was. Adrian Cole, the man who had once owned every room he walked into, now standing in a corner, nursing a drink he didn't want, pretending not to notice the people avoiding him. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did, but couldn't place the face. After all, I was just a ghost from his past, someone he'd erased. But ghosts have a way of returning when you least expect them. That night, I realized something terrifying. I didn't just want him to lose. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to be powerless, to wake up every day and question his worth, to live in the same silence he once forced upon me. And so, I waited for the perfect opening. It came 6 months later, when his company announced a merger, a desperate attempt to stay alive. But mergers are fragile things. One whisper, one rumor, one well-timed revelation, and the whole thing collapses. I didn't leak anything illegal. I simply exposed the truth. The unpaid contracts, the false reports, the overvalued assets. Nothing fabricated, just amplified. The market did the rest. His investors pulled out. The merger died before it was born. And for the first time, Adrian Cole was no longer feared, he was pitied. I remember the headline, "Cole Enterprises Faces Collapse Amid Financial Mismanagement." But that wasn't my victory yet. That was just the prelude, because I didn't just want to destroy his company, I wanted to own it. I wanted him to see my name where his once stood. I wanted him to understand that the man he called useless had built a kingdom from the ruins he left behind. And the most poetic part? He would hand it to me himself.